Sheena ma'am, you have to switch on your mic. I mean, when you start speaking, sorry.
Yeah,
It's okay.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And we are live now. Take it away.
All right. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the third episode of Breaking the Barriers, Women in Tech here on LinkedIn Live. My name is Rahul Neelmani. I am the co-founder and editor of Dynamic CIO. The first two episodes were done by my colleagues, by my able colleagues. I thought I'd take this opportunity today to be with a couple of very accomplished women leaders. Before we start, season's greetings to all those who have joined us live today. We sincerely hope that you're doing great and coping up with the situation, which is improving day by day. In a short while from now, as I said, we'll be talking to two very accomplished and outstanding women leaders who come from very diverse backgrounds, but have actually braved all odds and breached all barriers to be where they are today. However, let me spend a few minutes to give you a prelude to this episode and the leadership in general. So, no leadership journey, or for that matter, any journey to success whatsoever, can be called out without learning, without a fair share of failures along the path. It remains incomplete unless one confronts the unknown situations and deal with them with the help of wisdom, intelligence, and skills. Since this LinkedIn Live series focuses on women, and especially on women leaders in technology, many of today's women leaders in technology are highly regarded, not just because they are successful in their respective domains, but also because the road they have taken to get where they are is equally noteworthy, and their experiences are immensely motivating for those who are hoping to follow a similar path. While it won't be much of significance to discuss cliches like gender biases, absence of equal opportunity, and absence of conducive environment for women to reach onto the top, it is only prudent to understand from these accomplished women leaders how they have made it to the cut, overcoming all odds on their side. Every single conversation, it's my firm belief that every single conversation brings out lots of new dimensions of leadership that these women leaders have demonstrated. And yes, a lot of situations are also highlighted, which these leaders used as life lessons. So without waiting anymore, let me introduce the two fantastic women leaders that we have in this episode of LinkedIn Live. It's my honor and privilege to have with me Sheenam Ori, Vice President, Dell Digital Services, Dell Technologies India. Sheenam has been with Dell for almost three and a half years now. Before joining Dell, she has worked in leadership roles with Edgeverb, with SAP iFlex Solutions. She holds a bachelor's degree in engineering, electronics and communication from Bangalore University. Welcome, Sheenam.
Thank you. My pleasure and honor to be here.
Thank you for being with us. I also have the pleasure and privilege of having another very fascinating woman leader, Anshu Raja Sharma. Anshu is the Managing Director and Global Head Retail Banking Technology at Standard Chartered Bank. She has been with StanChart for a little over 2 years now. Prior to this, she worked in leadership roles in Vodafone, AIG Science, Goldman Sachs. Like Sheenam, Anshu also did her Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Science from Bangalore University, and then completed her executive management programs from IIM Bangalore and IIM Ahmedabad. So welcome, Anshu.
Thank you, Rahul, and very delighted and honored to be here. Looking forward
Thanks
to the
very much. So without further ado, let me straight away go into the conversation, and I would like to first involve Sheenam. Sheenam, you told you were quite inclined towards science since your early childhood, and also had early exposure in programming and coding. Were you career oriented since then? Did you find a path in pursuing science?
So career-oriented, yes. Actually, both my parents, and I give this credit to both my parents. Both my parents are Virgos, perfectionists at heart. My father was very clear that his daughters would study and do nothing else, right? So before marriage, I had never cooked. My first entry into the kitchen was post marriage. So career professionals was, I think, decided and kind of predetermined for us. Science was because I loved maths and physics, right? Those were my really cool favorite subjects. I could solve anything to do with maths very easily. Physics is pseudo maths. So those were really my favorite subjects, and therefore, engineering was like a predestined option in my mind. My mother wanted me to be a doctor, but in my mind, I was very clear it was an engineer.
Great, thanks. So I first, would like to say that I'm really privileged to be co-hosting this session with two of you accomplished women leaders. So Sheenam, you spoke about how you started, how you were inclined towards science right from the beginning. Anshu, what about you? In your case, you were born in a family where women have been working for generations. You mentioned from your grandmother to your mother. You find some genetic connection here, or did this trend set you up to work and lead?
Yeah. So look, yeah, I was very fortunate to be born and raised in a family where every woman worked. Um, and like I was saying, I was chatting with you guys earlier. My grandmother was she was only school till 8th standard, but along with her children, she studied along and did a double MA and went on to become a principal at a school. So I think that this whole thing about women have to work was sort of passed on to the DNA, if you will. So there was no two ways about it, about being independent. And I completely agree with with Shinam. My favorite subjects were also maths and science, and I was a very generally curious person. Unlike today, of course, we didn't have internet and computers back then. So World This Week was like a God sent program for me when it would come on Fridays on Doordarshan, because it just opened my eyes onto so many different things in the world which otherwise we would not really get to hear, and so on. So I was a pretty curious person, absolutely, totally grained into the fact that you got to do something with your life. Life is not just studying and cooking and cleaning and getting married and having kids. So that was never the philosophy, neither at home or not inside my head. I was in 7th standard when I started cooking. I'm a foodie, and I was raised in a family of 27 individuals. So it was a celebration, but nonetheless, I think it was quite fascinating, from the very beginning. And like I was saying, my first brush with self earned income was 700 rupees. I used to teach at class 12. I used to teach my neighbor's child who was in 2nd standard, and that came like a cakewalk. I mean, there's nothing much to be taught to a 2nd standard kid. But I would spend an hour with him getting his homework done and everything else, and I would get 700 rupees paid. I mean, the satisfaction and the feeling of yes, I can do it on my own. That feeling still is with me. I think 30 years later as well, and that has stayed on. So I think that kind of those were some of the initial seeds of career aspiration, if you will, that were sowed, and then of course you kind of plowed around.
Great. I think we have two very able women with whom we are talking right now. And Sheenam, you just on a lighter note, you said you didn't cook until you got married. So do you cook now?
Rarely.
Okay.
I cooked a lot
that-
after I got married, but then at some point of time we kept somebody at home, and then the cooking stopped. I did cook during the lockdown. For 3 months we had nobody at home, so my husband was subjected to memories of past, but otherwise rarely. Yes, now.
No, that was just a curious question that I wanted to ask. But the question to you, which I felt asking, was that you told us that your first job or first assignment way back in 1992, almost 3 decades ago, came through a walk-in interview. You just walked in for an interview, and you you got an offer. So what was this? What was that assignment? How did it become a life-shaping assignment, if it did, for you from there?
So yes, it was a walk-in interview. Actually, Citicorp Information Technologies Industries Limited, long name. It used to be called CITL then. Citicorp was the name, right? And my mother found this ad in the newspaper, and she said, "Why don't you go and apply?" And we actually lied to my father to go to this walk-in interview, because my father said, "Just study. Don't worry about a job. We'll think about it later." So I told my father I'm going for group studies. My mother collaborated with me in that situation. Went in, got the job. It was a very different experience, right? It was a very young organization. 25 of us had joined. We were made to do anything and everything. It was a startup mode, right? So we did tech docs, we did testing, we did development. We rewrote user manuals. So the amount of learning that came in from those kind of jobs really set the tone for a full-fledged development for us, right? And then you started there. I got married, moved to Bombay, came back again to Bangalore, took a sabbatical in the middle when Alok had to move to Australia. All of that journey instilled a sense of pride, a sense of ownership, and a sense of commitment, in my opinion, that I think has lasted me through. The fact that you can do anything and everything, the fact that if a challenge is thrown to you and you can come out of it, the fact that every job is important, right? In a software development life cycle, every job is important and has its place, came from there, right? And therefore, today, when somebody says, "No, I'm a full stack developer," I look back and think, maybe we were also full stack software engineers, right? No, maybe not developers, but software engineers.
Also, so Sheena, sorry, Anshu, very interestingly, you mentioned that the first money, the first income that you earned was by teaching your neighbors' kids. And you come from a family of teachers, of principals, all the females in your family have been teachers. How come you chose a different path? Was it something, you had planned that you want to go a different path altogether?
Actually, no. So I was a pretty happy-go-lucky child. I enjoyed studies. Like I said, I grew up in a joint family, so it was like a mela every day in the house. And so I didn't have half the aspirations or even a tenth of the aspirations I had. You just kind of took life one day at a time, and of course you had some fundamental values that this is what certain things that you start thinking about yourself. And just the same way Sheena mentioned, my mother also wanted me to be a doctor, and just by rule of elimination, right? Because I didn't want to be a doctor, I wrote my engineering entrances, and thankfully I made it to that. And then of course I wanted to do computer science. So I think the real streak of ambition came in when I started college, when I got into that, and then you start realizing what is it, and then you start developing your preferences in the subject and so on. But until then I was a happy-go-lucky. I mean, if I didn't really write my entrances, then I would be happy teaching as well. But having said that, I truly enjoy teaching. So in the last 30 years or so, I have and especially in the corporate career, I take a very active role in hiring from campuses and then training some of these people in and kind of teaching them along. So I truly enjoy teaching. Of course my kids will say otherwise, but I enjoy teaching.
Great. I think that's very interesting,
So, Sheenam, this conversation is actually now moving into a very interesting zone. You told that you and Alok lived apart for some time, and that was
Yes.
also a time of gathering more confidence. I believe you also took an early sabbatical in life. And I believe the company didn't have a policy, but they made an exception for you. Did that sabbatical come as a hindrance in the career, or how did that sabbatical happen, and how did you move on from there?
So Rahul, this was 95 end, right? I was in South Africa. I'd already been in South Africa for 5 months, away from a new husband and a new marriage. Um, Not something that is very romantic. It can be said practical, but not very romantic, right? And when Alok got this opportunity to go to Australia, we had no presence in Australia, our company, right? And there was no internet at that point of time. There used to be this local dabba sitting somewhere saying this is your internet point by that time. But otherwise, there was no connectivity. There was nothing as of today of working from anywhere, anytime kind of stuff, right? So I resigned in South Africa and came back to Mumbai. We were in Mumbai at that point of time. Came back to Mumbai, and my head of department, Dilip, he said, "But why do you want to resign?" So I said, "Dilip, what options do I have? We don't have a customer in Australia. We don't have an office in Australia. How do I work?" So he says, "Take a sabbatical." And I said, "What's a sabbatical?" Then he said, "For a year, we let you go without salary. And if you can't come back in a year, then you can resign." I said, fair enough. This sounds very good. So, you know, it did make a difference because the year was such, right? It was 1996. The industry was booming. My counterparts actually got an 80% hike that year. So you lost out on that. You lost out on a year of work and a year of promotion. But I think because of the fact that I came back and there was passion and there was this perseverance to do more, I kind of made that up, right? I don't think I have that difference in the salary any longer, and maybe even earning more than some of my other counterparts today. So I think if you are if you are wanting to make it and you have the passion and the commitment to yourself, things will happen.
Fantastic. Shipra, go on.
Yeah. So I want to come to some of the defining moments for you in terms of your journey. So Anshu, if you can talk about what were some of these key moments or milestones, in your academics as well as your career that acted as the foundation, and helped you in becoming the leader that you wanted to be.
Very interesting question, Chipra. And I'll also allude to some of the things that Sheenam said because they resonate and I have had similar sort of experiences. So let's talk about academics first. Academics was about, just enjoying and excelling. I think, I did fairly well in college. At that time, again, I was the happy-go-lucky person. I wish, and this was, the early 90s. So, the world was at your feet. Half of my class was moving to the US for education, for higher education. I now look back and think that, I wish I had done that at that point in time. It would have been much, much easier and so on. But nonetheless, I do also remember there was one campus interview that I got selected for. So, and back then you had those written test rounds and then interview rounds and so on. And in one of the technical rounds, I froze. I literally froze. I still get chills about that, thinking about it today as well. And, of course, it is inconsequential and everything else that happened after that, obviously more than made up for it in my life. But I still get, I still think about it saying, I still can't figure out what happened to me at that point. I completely froze. I still remember those three panelists asking me questions and I would have said something. And after that, I just froze. And obviously I didn't make it, and so on. And back then, now when I go for campuses, I make sure that I make the person absolutely comfortable and so on. And back then, of course, it was a very 0 or 1 thing, right? If you know the answer, you're in. If you don't know the answer, you're out, kind of a thing. There was no word called empathy and so on in the organizations back then. So right from that to, of course, I think the defining moments were even in my career, very early on. Again, I also got my the first job through a walk-in interview in Noida, in Delhi. Back again, newspaper ads used to come out and you would just go, and this was my first or perhaps the second one that I did, and I got it, and it was a very matter of fact thing, and I was happy, but even if it meant I needed to travel about 40 kilometers every day, but it was absolutely fine. And I think the first defining moment was that within the first few months of my joining, I was asked if I would like to go to US for a project. And my first reaction was absolutely yes. And I said yes, and I came back and I told my parents, and there was absolute full support. And I never needed to, check with them, am I okay to go or not go? So I didn't realize how important those things were. Now, when I look back, I realize that was because I think I was also growing, or, as an adult, as an individual, right? So it kind of laid the foundation stones of the personality that I was developing into as well. And now I know I can put words to that, or I can put saying that, I have the risk taking mindset, the risk appetite. I am not shy of, trying on new things. I don't look for a backup. And those are some of the traits I now know I have, and I can very confidently talk about that. But those are the instances that was developing. Of course, in the US as well, it was like it was my first time out of the country. I was, 20 years old. I remember celebrating my 21st birthday in the US, the first time you're there. And again, these are all dated times. There was no internet, there was nothing, and you don't know what to expect. I still remember the first Christmas I spent there, and I thought it's going to be much like our Diwali. Everybody will be buzzing and everything, but it was so dead. It was so dead on Christmas Day because everybody's indoors with their families and so on. So, just those experiences, the naivety of it all, which I think was nice, the simplicity of it all was nice. I mean, today when I, our children travel, they already know what to expect, so because they've seen it. But I think, I like the simpler times that we grew up in, or we explored things, and so on. From that, and then of course, uh, taking on a .com, which was, again, like Sheenam said, right, her experience with Citl was pretty similar to, me joining a .com, when some of my ex-Satyam colleagues decided, and they tapped my shoulder, and I said, yeah, why not? Look, I had nothing to lose. I was just, few years in the industry, and it was a very, very educating experience of, seeing everything up close and personal, how to run a company, and how do you go through distress times, and how do you kind of, right from the marketing to the PR to all the technology things as well. And absolutely, I was doing the front end bit, I was doing the back end bit. So yes, I can proudly call myself a full stack software engineer of those times. To then moving on to financial services, and to the domain that I have stayed on for 20 plus years now, and working on Wall Street, was again, I think that was a defining moment. The other watershed moment for me was, my stint at Goldman, which I think is one of the finest, absolutely finest, world class organizations. But at the same time, it's absolutely cutthroat, absolutely cutthroat. Every day, everybody puts their best foot forward, and how do you try and differentiate yourself and kind of do more, and and so on. So it was quite fascinating. Of course, in between, some life altering moments happened too. I had two children, but again, the organizations have been very supportive. But more importantly, it's the career intentionality. Just like how Sheenam pointed out, right, that she didn't want to leave her job because, but she wanted to have a career. And yes, you have career. I think is a marathon. It's not a 100-meter dash. So you have to go through all those laps. Some laps somebody else would be ahead of you. Some laps, but you will have your chance. And I've seen enough people and enough role models, that when your opportunity comes, then you are able to put your career in overdrive and kind of speed ahead. And look, it's a rat race if you make it out to be, right, if you are, but yes, I know that we are all very competitive, as well. So I think to that, to today, to present day, where, again, am I a technologist, am I a business leader? I think, we are all an amalgamation of everything. Now you are at a stage where, any problem that gets thrown at you, whether it's a technology problem, or a business problem, or a people problem, or a process problem, you're able to solve. How to get it solved, right? Either you solve it yourself, or how to get it done for the organization. How to drive the outcomes for the organization. So I think, it's been quite interesting, as long as you're learning and enjoying, and there have been a lot of those, I mean, it's not been a flat life, and I'm thankful for that.
Thank you very much, Anshu, and I can see that passion oozing out of your out of this conversation, and out of your discourse that you just presented.
Sorry
Let me
about the discourse.
let me just stay with you, and although you already have disclosed a lot of things and stole the thunder, But at the age of 20, you got an opportunity to go to the US. Um, and it is quite a daring thing for anyone, whether it is a male or a female, moving out of the country for the first time. Did that mark the beginning of your journey to success? Did this incident mold you into a risk taker? From managing risk, business or otherwise, is one of the biggest traits of the leadership, isn't it?
I agree. I think so. Yes, I think managing risk is important. Uh, did this mold me? No, I think the other way around, right? I realized that I have a risk appetite, and if I have to recall that time, US was really opening up, right? And that was the start of what we call the outsourcing or whatever else. This I'm talking about in 96, 97 time frame. Uh, Even before people discovered they had to do Y2K. So, it is even before that. But and a lot of people also said no. I mean, I remember that conversation in the organization, in back in the office in Noida, and some people said no. Some people said I need to talk to my parents. But I think that's just the fact that I said yes, and the confidence that I will be supported. I never had a shred of thought that my parents will say no. How can you go and things like that. I think there was a lot of smiles back home. So it is about the other way around, that you have an ability to take risk rather than this incident or this event in my life kind of said, okay, I can take risk. I think the other way around would be more true, and that is my personality. I realize quite a contrasting personality to my husband though. But that's how we complement each other. But yeah, but you're right. In business, you have to take certain bets, certain calculated risk. And I strongly believe in failing fast, right? So it's not every time your bets would pay off. And I've done that personally as well, right? There are certain jobs, for example, in my career that I've taken assuming that things would be a certain way and so on. And 1.5 years down the line, you realize it's not working out. And then you say, okay, I'm going to cut my losses and I'm going to cut the organization's losses. If I'm not enjoying it, then perhaps I need to be happy as well as the organization needs to be happy. So it's not that always some of those risks would pay off, but you won't know until you try.
So in fact, talking about risks, Sheena ma'am, I would want to ask you, you mentioned that there was a time early in your career when you were working with a startup and doing everything, you mentioned that almost like a full stack software engineer. But at a certain point in your career, you made the shift to from a technology to a business role,
It was much later.
Much later. But what was that inflection point that actually made you make that switch? And did you think it was kind of a risk that you were taking at that time?
Actually, not at that time. So I will have to step back a little bit in my career to tell you, how the ability to do anything and everything came about, right? So in about, I think it was 2004, and I was a full-fledged mom of single child and not ready to move out of Bangalore. So I used to do everything that you could allow me to do in Bangalore, right? So I was very much based here. And suddenly my manager came and he said, "This is a red customer. You are now responsible, in addition to everything that you're doing, you're now responsible for the account. Go convert it into green." And I just looked at him and said, "Do you want me to quit? And if you do, just tell me that. No, straight away. I will quit. I mean, you're setting me up for a failure. I don't even know the C of a customer with respect to this product. And you want me to go and convert a red implementation at the brink of a legal suit to green?" He said, "Yeah." And it was an organization I grew up with, an absolute made in India conversation. I threw tantrums, I did everything that I could, but he didn't budge. He would just say, "Yes, you have to do it." So I went there, did that. And I think for me, that was life changing because, going in there absolutely raw, absolutely green, not understanding what it really meant. Going to, a cold Montreal in the middle of winter, sitting there for 3 months and just understanding the pain points, developing a plan, and over the next 12 months, taking that account to green, gave me a realization that possibly I didn't know as much myself as much as possibly my manager did. And that's what sponsorship is all about, actually, right? So it was that 2004, 2005, leading to 2006 period that actually told me, Sheena, maybe you're meant out for more. And that's when the risks started, right? So in 2006 end, I still remember I woke up one night and I said, one morning, and I said, I want to quit. Right? 15 years, people thought I was mad. My driver said, you're mad. Right? Who quits such a job where you're treated like a queen? So I said, no, but I'm quitting. I need a change. So I, with similar intentions of joining a smaller setup, joined Business Objects. And from there, Business Objects was a very different journey. SAP acquired us, moved into SAP. And that's the business role that you're talking about is post SAP when I joined Infosys, right? Um, Infosys was Finacle, banking, back to banking. So, 15 years of banking stood stead. Right? I knew the functionality, I knew the domain very well, but it was a business role. So from product engineering straight away to understanding what are the KPIs of a business role, understanding that how to deliver satisfaction to customers, how do you manage Indian customers and global customers, how do you manage a global team? I had 4,000 people under me. How do you manage a large scale organization? How do how do you run change and transformation in such a large organization? How do you manage and lead men that who are older to you? Lots of learnings, but it wasn't. I never felt, even when I was interviewing for the job, that I couldn't do it. And I think the foundation of that started off in 2004, and I always thank Couple for that.
Oh, that's actually a very fascinating journey that you mentioned. Rahul, over to you.
Yeah. So, Anshu, going back to your first few statements in which you said that you took up a task just to earn $700. You were teaching a class second, grade second student, and we've also heard you mention that being financially independent was always on your mind from the very beginning. Um, I'm sure that that has nothing to do with leadership, but how did this feeling mold you into a stronger professional?
I think it has a lot to do with leadership, and I call it career intentionality, right? I think a lot of women, particularly, don't realize the power that comes with being financially independent.
And
And
I'm
when I say
interrupting
power,
you, but I second it totally.
I don't mean power in the wrong sense of the word. You are a lot more in control, right?
Absolutely.
You are, I mean, to me, the power is about making your choices, not kind of, drifting along, but the ability of you to be choosing for what you want. And I think that is important. You can make so that is, I think, and that kind of culminates into leadership as well, right? Leadership is not about just giving orders and so on, right? Because I mean that is definitely not leadership. We all know that leadership is about being able to influence people and so on, and they need to see. A lot of times when I speak to women, for example, at work, somebody who's thinking, how do I manage all this stuff at home, this expectation from this and this and this quarter, etc., etc., and so on. Maybe the easiest thing that comes to their mind is, let me leave my job first, right? That's the because that is, and I try to tell them that because you're able to take that decision because it's your choice, right? But we have to take that. You have to make sure that that's not a compromise you're making, and don't let go of. It is important to be financially independent, both for men and women. Unfortunately, in our country, and of course that is changing, right? We are only taught that men need to be financially independent and women can follow their trail, but it's not about that. I think every individual needs to have financial independence and managing their finances as well. What you do with that. A lot of women also, they earn but they have no clue what to do with that money, or they kind of give it off to someone. They don't know how to manage it, and so on. So I think I would think that financial independence is a lot more than just getting a paycheck, but it is also about it gives you a sense of security. It gives you the ability to make choices for yourself. And of course for the family and everything else, whatever it is. But I think that's a very, very important trait. uh, and you can't just let go of it. It's not an easy, I mean, you should not, whoever is sitting on the fence should think really, really hard about it, and not let go of that.
No, I completely agree with you and second that thought, that it's not just about earning money and having that financial security, but it's also about also a lot of other things come
Absolutely.
along with it. I
Yeah.
completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Chitra.
Yeah. So, Anshu, when you said that, when you're financially independent, you have the choice, and I think that choice is very important. But one of the things that we see with women is in the workforce is that when they start building the family, when they have the family, how to choose and prioritize between the family and work. So maybe Sheena ma'am, if you can give your viewpoint, were there any times when you had to make the tough choice between the two? How did you balance home and work in your career?
So I'm going to just allude to what Anshu said earlier, right? And the entire thing about financial independence and career, easy to let go. But I think my advice to everybody is that decision going to get you happiness? And if it's not going to make you happy, then don't make that decision, right? And that coming to, the question that you posed to me. Um, uh, when Adi was born, I was really young. I was 25, 26. And I had a full-fledged support system at home. My in-laws used to come very often. My mother stayed in Bangalore. We were together, right? So at 3.5 months, I was back in office when Adi was 3.5 months. During the course of the year, when we were launching our first version of FlexCube, we were officially on a 7-day working week because we had a timeline. We had promised a bank that we would have this version in your starting implementation on this date, right? So we were working on a reverse schedule. So when that happened, my manager, and there were really few women, right? Very few women. I may have been one in that entire crowd who was married. He came and said, "You just have had a baby. You don't need to do this." I said, "Listen, when you roll out promotions and bonuses at the end of the year and you don't give it to me, if I deserve it, I'm going to be extremely unhappy. So I'm not going to do this. I will be here. I will manage. That's my problem." Right? So I made a choice and I was happy with that choice. Later on, Alok, and Rahul alluded to this earlier, Alok had to move to Bombay for a year or maybe more. And I had, with great difficulty, secured admission for Adi in a play school, which kind of would get him to the next school that I was targeting. And I said, "I'm not coming. All right, you go." Um, a tough decision, right? But I said, "I'm not coming. I'll remain in Bangalore. You go." So Adi and I stayed back in Bangalore, and Alok was in Mumbai. One of those nights, Adi asked me, he said, "Will you also go away, leave me and go away?" And I realized at that point of time what it does to the child. So I made a commit to him. I said, "No, I will not do this unless I ask you and you're okay with it. I will not leave you and go anywhere." And I went back to my manager the next day and I said, "I'm not going to travel." Right? This was 1997, 1998. And I said, "I'm not going to travel. And do whatever you want, I will not travel." And letting go of travel at that point of time when we had FlexCube out meant that you were doing work in kind of a back office mode. I was still responsible for development. I set up the test center, I set up the support center, I did a lot of things, but I was not doing things that the company would get revenue by. So it was really not the most crucial thing that the organization needed its best people on. It was a compromise, but it made me happy, right? It generated happiness. It was the right decision at that point of time for me in my life. And I've never regretted it, right? So I just wanted to give those two examples where, you sometimes give your career importance, sometimes you give your life personal life importance. But finally, it's your life. And if it makes you happy, go ahead and do it, right? It, decide what plays higher, but don't let go of your career. Even at that point of time, I didn't say I let go of my career and I moved to Bombay. I didn't do that, right? I had that choice also. So I didn't do that, right? But I promised my son and I kept to that promise till 2004. The first time I traveled after that was in 2004. And when I asked Adi, he said, yeah, get me some red t-shirts, right? So it depends on your circumstance. It depends on the right choice, but don't give up on something that is intrinsically important to me. To me, my career eh, is very important, and that I cannot let go of totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think without making compromises on either side, I think you have accomplished you have exemplary accomplishments that you have demonstrated. However, Shinam, like, can I again ask something out of turn?
Yep.
There's always this dichotomy in our playing in our minds, that there's on one side there's women leadership, on the other side predominant. I mean, the world is full of male leadership, and I'm not going to ask for any kind of bashing, but what are the typical traits that a woman as a leader brings that may not be present, when it comes to male leadership? Is it about
I
emotional quotient? Is it about IQ? Is it about empathy?
I think it's a combination of emotional intelligence and empathy that a woman brings to the table. And I was first, exposed to this. I realized it for the first time when I joined Business Objects, right? And Vibhav, who was the head of Business Objects, had a whole set of men leaders, and I came in. I think I was the last one to join his leadership team as he was setting out in India. And his wife told me, he said, Vibhav always tells me that you bring a very different opinion on the table. So I asked him, I said, so what do I bring on the table that is different? And he said, see, when you bring in the table, you bring reality, you bring people on the table, you bring emotions on the table, and you come back and say, this person may not like it. So, how are we going to treat this person as a person and not as a resource, right? When the men are talking, they're talking a lot of logic, they're talking a lot of data. For you, all of that is important. But what's also important is how does that other person feel when I do something, right? And that to me, I think, was the first time I understood that there is a difference. Right, till that time, because we had grown up, in that startup culture, there was no difference between me and the other person sitting next to me, right? If he was doing a night out, I was also doing a night out. There was never anything, and you were growing up at that point of time. That was the first time really that came into my own, mindset, so to say. And I think it's very true. When I now have women and men reporting into me, I can see that difference, right? And the fact that you have the women now also influencing the other side, there is this balance that comes into the organization when you have that kind of both kinds of leaderships, right? um, when I look back, I also see myself um, at weak points because of the fact that I bring in a little bit of softness, right? I'm more emotional myself, more than possibly my men counterparts, and there is a necessity for us to kind of convert that and hold those reactions and convert them into responses. And those are things that you have to learn. So I think it's a balance, but just having different types of people in your leadership makes a lot of difference.
Anshu, would you like to add something to what Shinam said?
First of all, 100% agreement with her. Absolutely, that is the diversity of thought that as leaders we need to bring forward. And I also think that women bring, and it is not about being a weaker aspect. It's not a softer aspect. Women are equally result oriented. And I remember I was at a leadership program at IIM Ahmedabad. At the parting, at the finale, each one of us in the class had to write a slogan about the other person and pin on their backs, right? So it was called an activity called talking behind your back. So what do people think of you behind, of you? And somebody had written for me, she can and she will, right? So that just talks about the result orientation. But the fact that we are chasing, women mostly chase results. They don't chase egos. They don't want to see their name on the plaque. That is not the most important thing. And it's not again about male bashing, but I think that's the natural instinct, right? When you look at even sports, competitive sports as well, and so on, it is more about, achieving that perfection than saying, yeah, me, myself, and the rara. And I think that's the perspective that women bring. Also, like Sheenam said, right, the emotional and the empathy, quotient. Uh, Women can be very tough managers and tough taskmasters as well. Have absolutely no mercy too. But at the same time, I think the sense of urgency and to do it perfectly, I think is very, very strong with women, very, very strong. And I think sometimes that becomes a downside as well, because you kind of keep chasing that. You sometimes, not everything has to be 100% perfect for it to succeed. So things like that, I think, and that's why it is important to get all perspectives on the table. That's why it's important for companies to get diverse perspectives from all over the place, right? And not just get one house of the brain working.
So in fact, I just will tie into the fact, Anshu, that you mentioned earlier when you had gone in for an interview, and you mentioned that there was a lack of empathy at that time. Do you think that with more women leaders coming into the domain, we are seeing more empathy, seeping into the leadership now?
Absolutely. What I realize is, and I think, the lesson that you learn after, perhaps I am half my life now, hit the half life mark. So you realize that life is not 0 and 1. It is not pass and fail. It is a continuous journey. And I wish when I froze in that interview, if somebody would have, given me a glass of water, talked to me for 5 minutes, I would have come back. And now I think it's their loss and not mine. Of course, my career took off and everything else, but yes, absolutely, I think we need to stop judging people and every situation as a pass or fail, and so on. And that is what is the new age leadership about, right? No longer. I remember in those good old days of when we were doing projects and stuff, there was projects would fail and you would tag a project as a failure, and then you will do a post-mortem and things like that. But I think everything is a learning, right? If ISRO launched a satellite and it didn't go through, it is still a huge learning. It didn't fail, but and so on. So I think the world has also changed, and that's why it is important for a diverse perspective to come through. To see things from different lenses, and diverse is not just about gender diversity, right? It is about just diversity of thoughts of different nature. You can't be cloning your own style of people. Then you will just be building an army of people who can only think in one dimension.
So you just said a word that women can also be hard task masters. I can tell it with my experience. They can be. I've had a female boss, and huge respect for her. But I completely agree with you. But the question to both of you, I mean, I'll ask this to Shinam first, and you can also come in to answer. But is this phrase called being a taskmaster, is it interconnected with successful leadership, or a leader can be a lenient taskmaster and also be a brilliant leader?
That's for me, Rahul?
Yeah.
So I'll give you an episode what happened in SAP, right? I had somebody who was reporting into me who was a kind of he was rated at level 5, which was the highest level for the last 2 years. And when he kind of was reporting to me, I didn't believe that was the right rating, and I was kind of bringing him down to an average rating. We had a very long conversation. It was about an hour-long conversation. And at the end of that conversation, he said, Sheena, why are you rating me, very differently from what I've been rated earlier? I have never been told the kind of things that you told me. The kind of feedback that you've given me has been so constructive that I believe that in the next 2 years, I will be back and I'll be doing far better roles than I have been doing today. I think for a leader, it's important to be constructive. Okay. Even when you are harsh, are you being constructive? Are you telling the other person what he or she can do? Right? That's, I think, extremely important. Way forward has to be defined. And even if you're doing a very harsh conversation, are you doing it with respect? And are you ensuring that you are maintaining the dignity for the other person? Right? You're doing that with utmost care is very, very important. I think my team members, my leaders will all come back to you and tell you that she's extremely hard. But they will never tell you that, I have been bad on them. Right? That's how you really build loyalty, right? I think that's very important. I think that's the key tenet of a good leader, man or woman otherwise. I think that's very, very important that you maintain that dignity for the other person, right? And start with positive, give very constructive feedback, say what the other person didn't do well and what could have been done and what should now be done. I think that's what builds you as a leader.
Anshu, your views on that?
Very rightly said. The only fourth point I would like to add is, and then don't make it personal. I mean, again, this is about both men and women. Don't make it personal, right? If you had that tough conversation, have it, and then don't linger that on, and don't make it, don't carry that forward. And I think it's interesting that you asked that question, Rahul. That in my experience, in fact, a lot of men have been these sort of taskmasters, leaders, and of course sitting in very, very strong and high positions. But you realize that they can only get the work done, right? They are not able to inspire. So I think it has to be a mix of, if you are sort of a taskmaster versus a leader who inspires. A taskmaster will typically give orders and kind of reprimand when things are not going right. But are they really able to inspire people? Are you able to develop people? And that takes time. Are you able to invest your time in people? People development is a very, very tricky subject, and it is not an HR topic. It is every leader's responsibility to kind of invest time into their people and develop them. How many of us do succession planning? How many of us develop people who will take our roles so that we can move on to the next roles, and so on? So I think, a whole lot of that. And I don't think there is a man or woman trend there. It is about people. It is about, what kind of a leader are you? And how much insecurity you carry in you as an individual.
Yeah. So actually, we have received a question on the feed, and the question is that, what are your suggestions for women leaders, or for people in general, in terms of how can they build the leadership quotient, especially in the middle and the top management? How can they groom themselves to become good leaders? So, Anshu, you can take it first. Yeah.
Sure, let me go first. I would think 3 traits, right? And then, of course, there's no formula for that. One is, first of all, to be self-aware, right? First, understand what kind of a person are you, irrespective of wherever in the career path you are. So be self-aware. What drives you? What works well with you? What does not? And then second is, of course, developing technical and domain expertise. And third is, of course, like I said, get rid of any insecurities, and that will come as part of the self-awareness, right? And self-awareness is not just about looking at your appraisals and so on. It is a true reflection of what kind of a person are you. And sometimes I'm not a huge fan of all these psychometric tests, but there was a test called Hogan that I did a couple of years back, and I think that kind of that was a very telling one. So I would suggest you go look that up, because it tells you the characteristics of personality that you are. And also sometimes the same traits can be a detractor, and the same traits can be your strengths as well. and it really helped me. And I coached myself then to kind of say, am I going overboard here, and so on. And it was quite fascinating. So I think, being self-aware, absolutely developing your expertise in both, functional areas and technical areas, and then charting out a path, and letting go of things, and getting rid of that insecurity.
Sheena ma'am, your recommendations for women aspiring to be leaders?
So I totally agree with what Anshu has said. I think one of the things that I would add would be, this urge to be perfect is very difficult for all of us, right? And I will give you an example of a recent interaction which I had with a group of women who are aspiring leaders and are going through a program. We have a year-long program called Rise, and we try and put them through some uncomfortable situations in that, and they had to give out 2 or 3 things in the same time frame, right? So everybody said it's very difficult. I just asked one question. I said, A, did anybody demand perfection? And there was silence. The B, did anybody say you can't negotiate? There was silence, right? Learn to ask. You don't need to be perfect in everything that you do. Okay, say what you can do and ask, therefore, what is possible. Stretch. I'm not saying don't stretch, but don't take stress for perfection. Don't not ask, right? At best, you will be said no. Doesn't change anything, right? But you could be said a yes. There is a chance that the yes can come out, right? And it did that day, right? They got 2 weeks more from me at that point of time. So why not ask?
Yeah.
Right? Those would be my 2 advices.
Yeah, I think that asking is a very important thing. Whether it's for support, whether it's for help, whether it's for the next role, whether it's for a compensation increase, asking. And a lot of times women don't ask, and then you feel disappointed in your head, and you start engaging less and less. It kind of impacts your engagement as well. So ask, and not assume.
Great. I think, Shipra, you did a fantastic job of asking that final question. I think we have already gone overboard in terms of time, and the weekend is unfolding. We should not keep anybody waiting for that. Thank you, Sheenam. Thank you, Anshu, for your valuable time. It was a fantastic discussion, and I'm sure whoever joined us live for this conversation must have learned a lot. They must have imbibed a lot from both of you, from your experiences. So thank you very much, and wish you a great week and weekend ahead.
Thank you. I hope everybody learned something. I enjoyed myself. Thank you, Anshu.
Thank you. Very enjoyable conversation. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Anshu ma'am and Sheena ma'am. I mean, I in fact learned a lot. So you at least have one person in front of you, and acknowledge that it was a really insightful session. At least I will have a lot of key takeaways to take back with me today. Thank you so much, and a great weekend to both of you and to all our viewers.
Thank you.
You and Rahul too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.